Good day. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Linda Janak. I'm the CEO of Talent Guard, and I have the great pleasure of talking about something that's very passionate to me personally, and that is career pathing. And I have today with me Sandia Johnson, and she has an extensive background in career pathing and organizational development. And today, the both of us, mostly Sandia, will be talking about taking the confusion out of competency-based career pathing. And Sandia has extensive experience in organizational development. She spent quite a bit of time with some leading companies like Ingersoll Rand, Le Méridien Hotel, Citigroup, and Aon Hewitt. So I hope that you enjoy the session, and the session is being recorded, and so we will make the webinar available on our website and the recording probably tomorrow morning in our Learning Center. So you will have access to the information and the materials if you want to study it further. Also, if you would like to ask questions using the chat feature, please do so, and we will answer those questions at the end of the webinar. And without further ado, I would like to pass the reins over to Sandia.
Thank you so much, Linda, and thank you all of you out there who are able to join us today. It is my pleasure as well to talk about a topic that I feel so passionately about. To make this a little bit more exciting and a little bit more engaging, I will be using the characters from the HBO show Silicon Valley. Not sure if a lot of you follow the show, but in essence, this is about a small startup called Pied Piper. And Richard, seated in the middle, is the founder and leader, and he's trying to create a professional company along with his team. And each of them, as you can see on their faces, is very confused, and which is kind of the state of most of the show, because they're trying to deal with unforeseeable problems, and they're constantly dazed and asking questions. And in this case, they have several questions, and great ones, about career pathing, which we're going to tackle one at a time. The questions include, and these also happen to be the 5 questions that we get quite frequently about career pathing, such as, is there a business case for it? Are there companies that actually can do it? Is it done well? If so, who? As from an employee's perspective, if I want someone else's job, does a career path truly help me? Will it get me there? And oh, by the way, what is my manager's role in all of this? And competencies, that much dared word, how does that fit in with career pathing? So before we dive into each of these questions, let's talk about a few terminologies that I will be using frequently and consistently, hopefully, throughout this presentation. I call them fondly the 3 C's: career pathing, competencies, and career development. They are interrelated, but they each mean something different. So let's start with career pathing. The word career actually is a French word which means a road or a race course. So a career usually begins with having a plan, having a view, a long-term view of a career trajectory. With that plan then comes a path, meaning they're charting out a course and understanding the progression of the roads that will take you towards your plan. And that is what career pathing is. Competencies. I'm sure all of you probably have had managers who cringe at the very word competencies. We'll try to do a little bit in terms of breaking down the mysteries of competencies in today's session. But really what competencies mean are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that an employee is going to need to move through each role in his or her career path. You'll find me using knowledge, behaviors, or skills even interchangeably with competencies, but competencies essentially is a collection of all of these traits. So career development, what does that mean? It is the process of gaining those competencies that are needed to move along in your career path. So this development may come in various shapes. It may come in the form of action learning, from interaction with others, from training classes, seminars, conferences, webinars, etc. So career development is the lifelong process of gaining competencies. To summarize, your individual has a career plan, that is their goals. They have a path, meaning the steps, competencies, meaning the skills and behaviors they need to move through the transition from one role to another on the career path, and then development, which is the process of gaining those competencies. One of the things that I do want to mention here is that we have a global crisis. And that global crisis was probably spelled out best by former President Obama when he said, "We want to make it easier to join individuals looking for jobs with businesses looking to hire." Industry leaders are feeling the pain of these major skill gaps that we need to address. This skill gap is usually occurring because there's a disconnect between what employers or organizations are expecting and what the workforce actually brings to the table. Dennis Yang, the CEO of Udemy, said, "In today's economy, skills are a universal currency, and many American workers are coming up short." Now, mind you, while he mentions America in this statement, this is truly a global crisis. So, if you've been on a search, and you probably know how hard it is to find a job that clearly fits your skills and experiences. Candidates, on one hand, are forced to go through tons of job descriptions before they can even decipher what the company is trying to portray. Employers, on the other hand, are complaining because they're trying very hard to find the right candidates with the right skill match to come and join their organization. So we can go on and on about how the system's broken down and is not working very well. That's where Talent Guard comes in, because we are able to help upskill your workforce and help them close close the skill gap that we talked about just now. Well, competencies is just not an HR thing, and this might be something that your business leaders may not know, but 70 to 80% of the Fortune 500 companies rely heavily on competencies. That's their true measure of success, because by defining, and they are able to then measure work and performance of others against these competencies. And the reason why they're using competencies is because they are able to also align people with the corporate value. So it really helps build culture. It also helps to ensure that they're bringing in or selecting and attracting the right talent into the organization, developing them on the right skills, as well as making sure that they know how they can progress in their career paths. Now that we have our basics covered, I think we can move on now to the very first question posed by the Silicon Valley crew. The question is, so what does competency have to do with career pathing? Extremely valid point. But before I answer that, let me switch back again once again to the skill gap issue we talked about. It is so important to develop a universal skill-based job library. And we can't stress that enough. It's time to go beyond just having key responsibilities as in a job description or listing activities that need to be completed. We are moving into the digital age, and companies like IBM Connexa and HRSG have done a fantastic job in creating a lot of infrastructure around competencies and making it so much simpler to adopt. By doing this, as the slide here depicts, the individuals are able to understand what employers really need in terms of experience, and then they can in turn go and ensure that they are gaining those experiences and showcasing them. Talent Guard, through our technology, is able to bring the employers through the libraries and the individuals through their profiles together so we can close that gap. So, competencies, in other words, and this is my favorite phrase, you cannot travel along a career path if you don't have a common language like competencies. And typically, common competency models have usually layers. They have a foundational or core competency layer that cuts across to individuals across every level. Then you have professional competencies that really depict the technical areas that a person should have their skills in. And then leadership competencies, typically management, then leading on to senior leaders and maybe even executives at the top of the house. So we know that competencies set direction, but then competency modeling itself seems complicated. Let's kind of mention here that we've done some research and we see that there are 10 best practices out there when it comes to competency modeling. And this is something that Talent Guard has compiled based on all of the lessons learned both from academia as well as practitioners. We find that first and foremost, there's got to be some rigor and some discipline in identifying competencies. We do not recommend just pulling competencies from thin air. I'm kidding about it, but of course, because what happens then is that you end up with this very large list of words which are poorly defined and they don't have any clear meaning. Successful competency models really work well or align well with the business strategy, and they also, when you do that, they immediately capture the attention of your senior leaders. Competencies also are really powerful when you are connecting them with the future skills that the organization is going to need in order to be successful. Also, one of the bullets here specified that we strongly recommend leveraging existing competency libraries. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. Good research has already been done in these areas. Also, make sure that you limit the number of competencies. I know at one point it was probably a fad to have 35, 45 competencies on a particular role. Today, more and more companies are limiting that. For one example that comes to mind is Microsoft. And Microsoft pretty much gives some guidelines around the number of competencies, for instance. And they say, you know what, every role should have approximately 12 foundational or core competencies and up to 12 technical competencies. And that's it. You don't need to make it any more complicated than that. So here's some information on the best case scenario or the best practice in competency modeling. So with that, we'll move to Jared. And Jared in the show is always quizzical and has lots of deep questions. And the question that he raises here is one that probably every CEO and CFO wants to know. Is there a business case for career pathing? To some business leaders, to be honest, career pathing may sound like just another talent program that the organization just has to do, and the benefits are not quantifiable. And that is just not true, because in the following slides, I'm going to share with you some of the positive impact that career pathing has found to have on organizations. So for one, career pathing is a significant predictor in lowering intention to leave. And this is a slide that shows that, and it says that it's regardless of gender, age, level of education, etc. So none of those criteria matter. Irrespective, high quality career development is a defense against regrettable loss. And I know a lot of us talk about retention strategies. Here's another one. 79% of employees leave their jobs voluntary, and they literally cite career pathing as a primary reason for them leaving their jobs. And we all know how expensive attrition is for organizations. It does not make good financial sense. Career pathing builds loyalty, and this is kind of a little humor here because it shows how people get so excited about their brand, about their company and their organization. They want to be associated with it. They want to be loyal to it. They want to talk positively about the organization to others because they feel that the company cares enough to invest in their future. So career development, in my mind, should be done because managers truly care about the progress of their employees and not just because it's just another HR driven mandate, right? So the concepts here that we believe again and try to reinforce as we in both with our technology as well as in our way of thinking is the idea that career lattice has replaced the old traditional concept of career ladder. In the past, we thought of a career as being a job or simply a place that you sat between 9 and 5, and success was measured mostly in terms of your paycheck, the size of your office, or other rewards and perks. But today it's different. I mean, career movement can be literally along and into other areas in the same level. It could be upward. And when you really think about what's going on within our workforce, we could, sorry about that, we could have individuals who are baby boomers, for instance, wanting to stay on in the workforce. So, and maybe they want to de-accelerate their career. So you want to allow all of these things or possibilities to happen within your career pathing. And talent guard, our system permits that. So we talked about so far career pathing being important because it helps lower attrition, it creates loyalty. But here's another one, folks. And with loyalty also comes employee engagement and productivity. And that's key because if you have engaged people, we know that we are going to be more productive, we're going to make more money for the company, and we're going to also create loyal customers. So it does make great business sense to ensure that we as organizations, we focus on career development and ensure our people are motivated. On the flip side, here's some numbers for you. Disengaged employees can be extremely expensive. If career pathing is done well, their payoff can be substantial in terms of long-term highly engaged talent. If not done well, the price the organizations can pay due to lost productivity is huge. And this is a Gallup number, and Gallup estimates that actively disengaged employees can cost 450 to 550 billion in lost productivity per year. So now that we know career pathing is important, how well are organizations or a typical organization doing it? Unfortunately, the numbers here does not speak very highly. 81% of employees, for instance, here say that their skills are not being fully utilized at work, and only 30% of employees are satisfied with the future career opportunities at their organization. So these are rather grim statistics. So probably this one is one of my favorites. Probably the most concerning is that we don't realize that career pathing is truly the main engine for developing future leaders. Let me make this clear. Career pathing or career development is an important driver for building and sustaining succession planning within your organizations. But let's see once again how companies are doing with this. Despite this, only 25% of organizations have capable, trained successors who have identified, and that too for just 10%. So you notice in this slide it says 1 out of 10. So that means 10% of our jobs we have people, and only 25% of organizations are even doing this. And then how many of them actually utilize career paths? Only 17% of companies do so. And with that, only half of those 17%, which is 8.5, actually use technology to deliver career programs effectively. So this goes to show that in spite of knowing that career development and career pathing is critical, we have very few organizations that are doing this well. And this is a slide that we pulled from Cornell article. And it really highlights a couple of things beyond what we talked about. It says how career pathing actually even enhances how an organization looks to potential new hires, right? It increases attractiveness by up to 35%. It can drive performance up by 28%, and it decreases the probability of employees leaving to about 40% or more. So, again, career pathing is supports talent management right from hire to retire. It's a common thread, and therefore it's something that should be given adequate priority, right? So hopefully that answers Jared's question. We now move on to Dinesh. Now, this is a character. He is from Pakistan. He tends to be very abrupt, assertive, and impatient and forceful. But most of the time, you will find him being very me-centric. So it's not surprising that he's asking another question. But this one is really talking about, so we get it, that career development is really important to organizations. But what about to the employee? Does career pathing, is it really a beneficial tool for the employee just as much as the business? Great question. So here's a response to Dinesh's question. Career path is like having a roadmap to follow, right? So one of the things that we want to do today, especially in a competitive environment, is to have tools so that the employees can manage their career and grow professionally by ensuring that they take increased responsibility. By having a career path, employees like Dinesh are able to actually plan their career by deciding on their goals, by knowing what their strengths are as well as their skill gaps, knowing what the potential moves are next, and then building an individualized, personalized career path. Because we need to start thinking about a career path as an individual's professional insurance policy. If you want to make sure that you are always current, then employees should be asking questions like, where are the gaps? What are the skill gaps that I have? What should I be doing to gain experience to bridge those skill gaps? And how should I be creating a development plan to proactively address them? Those are the types of questions that an employee should be thinking about. So now we come to Guilfoyle. Now, Guilfoyle here and Dinesh typically tend to conspire together. So here's another question that, on that same tone, Guilfoyle here wants clarity on the roles in career pathing. So who does what? What does my manager do, and then what do I do? Is everything up to my manager, or is something that I'm responsible for? Folks, one of the things that we at Talent Guard believe very strongly is that one of the reasons why organizations fail at career planning is because we tend to point the finger on the other and make it sound like somebody else is responsible. In essence, we believe it is the role of the organization. There's a role to play by the employees, and there's a role to play by the manager. But let's begin with the organization. They can positively affect the career of an employee by being sponsors. So they play a sponsorship role. Let me explain. By this, we mean that they should be the one, the organization, and usually that's HR collaborating with senior leaders, should listen to what the employees want and need. They should be thinking about what are the critical competencies that are needed in the organization. They should be publishing these. They should be providing learning opportunities, making them available, such as job rotations and shadowing and mentoring and training, etc. But they should be providing all those resources. The manager should be playing a supportive role, right? So the organization plays a sponsorship role. The manager plays a supportive role. They provide assistance to the employee. They guide them. They are the navigators. They try to do their best to engage in career conversations, share their ideas, personal experience and stories, and guide employees in their personal journeys. Now, the employee, they do perform a much more involved task, and they play a directive role in their career pathing. By this, we mean that they are in charge. They have to chart the course. So you give them the steering wheel, help them guide and decide where they want to go, and then work with the resource and tools provided by the organization, the manager, to get there. So everybody plays a role. So I'm sure this is not a response that Guilfoyle probably wants to hear, but this is the truth. So Do organizations have responsibility to try and expand the scope of their development activities of their employees? Absolutely, yes. The best organizations in our minds are those that ask the question, how can we harness our talent skills better? The best managers, are they responsible for showing interest in the career path of an employee? Absolutely, yes. We want the managers to be well informed, to be aware, to also have some knowledge and create and share some creative ways for which the employees can take on in order to help them develop their future. And the best employees, they should be as involved, if not greater. They should be thinking about how they can add mission critical skills for the organization so they can put themselves in a place of being valued by the firm, right? So hopefully this answers Guilfoyle's question. One of the latest CEB Career Employee Survey study is extremely fascinating, because one of the things that they show is that organizations that build employee skills truly perform better in the long run. And how do these companies actually carry this out? In order to have a compelling career development program or a compelling career, you need to have a holistic, well thought out program that approaches it from job skills assessment perspective, where an employee can actually go in and assess their current competencies and see where the gaps are, that the leaders within the organizations are enabled to actually go in and have or engage in career conversations, then career guides, so there's detail and tools around which these discussions and skills assessment can occur, and they're based on which there can be advice given to employees, and the ability for the employees to actually match those skills against future goals, jobs, having some solid technology platform. So this is what will get companies to actually close the skill gaps. Now, the reason I set this up is because as we go on to our next question, which talks about, now tell us, are there companies that do this well? Are there actually companies that are able to do leader enablement as well as making sure that there's technology and all of this put together? Are they companies? And the answer is absolutely. We've actually done our research to look around and see what are some companies doing. And we have 3 to showcase to you. One of the things as a precursor we want to state here is that we find that the companies that have done best, and this is again a Hay Group research study, which shows that the 20 best companies for leadership, they tend to reiterate a structured approach. Not too concrete and say that it's inflexible, but certainly there is a method, and there is a view of how the organization puts out the career development program. This one is Sprint. You've probably already seen the new ads of Sprint, where the Verizon guy Paul is now being hired by Sprint. But how did Sprint get there, and how did they get to the place where they actually built out a career development plan? If you see in the top right hand slide, top corner, we said they do 2 things very well. They do assessments and they do leader enablement very well. One is that they have an online resource for all employees, and these include strategic roadmaps so that employees can follow along. They can take a battery of tests, and then they can determine what their career path needs to be based on these tools. Next, they enable their managers. Their managers have it's called It's All About You webcasts that are targeted to frontline employees, so managers, so that they can kind of brush up on what kind of, how to respond to an employee when they come and ask for questions as well. And they use this as a means by which they can also have them, they can rewatch, and they say that they have over 4,500 employees who are engaged in this. So they have, again, technology, they have tools, they have assessments that they've put in front of their employees. Then you have GM. GM has taken a very interesting approach in order to address their career development for global employees. And their approach has been to leverage existing career materials that are being developed by the employees. So one of the examples, which is again very interesting in that this is not a bunch of HR people sitting in silo trying to develop career tools, but these are actually, in these cases, they've engaged the employees to come up with the ideas on how they would like to see career development look like for the organization. So the first example of the career development and advancement group, it's a social collaboration forum, and this was created by a GM engineer who was very passionate about career development, and this was his idea. He built it, and today the forum is a very popular place where most of the GM uh, employees can join. It's really a social group, so they can, whoever feels like can join. And they say that this forum has one of the most members in it. Another idea that GM has, also created by an employee, is a popular tool called My GM Bucket List. And it's usually like a one-page resource that employees use to list out 25 things that they would like to accomplish while they're a GM. And this was actually repurposed by a GM employee who personally developed it as a career planner for himself and then shared it to the broader group. And now a lot of the employees are using it as well to start thinking about what do they want to get out of their tenure while at GM, which is really cool because then it again shows you an example of having a career guide, right? As we talked about the four different pillars, this is a career guide type of a tool where you have employees saying, here's is a guide that tells me what I need to get, how I could get more experience while I'm in this organization. Another one, probably a little bit of a spin-off from a Seinfeld show, is leaders in cars asking talent development questions. So they literally have these video clips of leaders in their cars engaging with their teams in conversations and questions about some of the problems and issues that they face while responding to employee questions. The third example that we have is Rackspace Inc. We've probably all heard a lot about Rackspace, and this is their famous tag: once you go to Rackspace, you never go backspace. But what they do is, okay, the secret to many companies that have technical jobs is and the retention is harder because now if you do not have a technical career track, you might lose those people because you don't have anywhere for them to go beyond their highest technical expertise, because then typically managers are considered the next move up. And what if they really didn't want to go there? So in Rackspace, they introduced what's called the TCT program, the technical career track, where they actually create levels of director, VP, and SVP for the people in those individuals in their career track. They put in a little bit more criteria. Apparently, in the last 3 years, there has been more definition to the program. There is a formal induction process that happens twice a year. They're usually nominated and they have to go to like 2 or 3 levels of screening. They get into the program. And what is really exciting is that once individuals get into the program, Rackspace actually taps into these individuals to benefit their organization by including them in big decisions, innovative ideas, and helping the organizations, for instance, get to market faster with a product. They engage these individuals and make them feel like they're truly contributing to the organization in a big way. So these are all examples of companies who've added more structure and rigor to their career pathing, but yet made them fun and usable as well as engaging for their employees. And these organizations have seen the advantages. The quote here from Van Lindbergh from Rackspace is very insightful because it shows that organizations that have done this well can feel the impact that career pathing can have in the overall results. So, to summarize this question, we'd like to reiterate that Talent Guard has partnered with a lot of industry leaders, and just like the study, we have the ability to ensure that all the 4 components can work together with the use of our technology. We can have skills assessments built in. We can ensure that leaders feel enabled, that their career guides, and etc., that are available in the technology, and having career pathing for sustainability in the long run is something that we have built our expertise around. So relevant tactics, to answer Richard's question, have companies done it well? Absolutely. by building roadmaps, by creating leader enablement, just like Sprint's career management toolkit and Rackspace TCT. GM's bucket list is a great example of having a discussion framework. But remember, it also means that you need to have manager incentives as well as communication and marketing to ensure that this practice is not just a one-time flavor of the month or flavor of the year, but it's an ongoing effort to ensure that both managers and the organization as a whole is incentivized to keep the practice moving and to truly create a culture that supports career development. So, what then? And now we've answered all the questions from the Silicon Valley team, but we'd like to take it one step further. While we've answered all these questions, I know one of the things that organizations feel most is so this is all great, right? So we know that's beneficial, we know it's powerful, it helps the organization, it helps the employee, but where do we begin? What do we have to do in order to implement a competency-based career pathing program and actually get it off the ground? It seems so daunting and it seems so complicated. This is where we at Talent Guard we've done this, and what we've done is we've created very simple steps, and we actually consult with organizations and we help them get started. Let us share with you some of our intellectual property here. So the first thing, we feel that the number one step in the process to get you off the ground is to ensure that there is a good view of the roles, or what we call as a role architecture. We understand together how every role in your department plays out. We try to analyze them from the perspective of an organizational, and this is the traditional pyramid, but it gets us going. We typically try to lay them out in 5 to 6 levels. We try to understand how an employee progresses within the organization. And then within each function, we try to see what is then the levels that are created, and also understand how individuals can move from one role to another. So this may seem very simple and intuitive, but this is a very good first step to do. Once you've got your role architecture or your framework figured out, the next is to look at your competency framework, right? Because at the end of the day, career pathing is the integration of roles and competencies. So within the competency framework, our belief entirely is to keep it simple and straightforward. The foundational competencies are important because they should be culturally driven. They should be driving the culture of the organizations, and they may be different. But we find that there are a lot of similarities because most organizations are expecting the same things from all their roles within the organization. Then we want to have good leadership competencies. You want to be clear what you're expecting from your leaders. And usually that's anyone who has people responsibility up. Then you want to be clear about the functional and the technical competencies. What are those things that is important to IT, or what is important to HR, and so on. So even when you make those competencies clear, there may be some parallels across functions, but it's good to create that transparency across the organization as well. So having competency framework is your next step. Then we go one step further with competencies, and it is not, let me assure you that it's not at all complicated, because what you do next is you address each competency for each role and assign a proficiency level. And usually a proficiency level is 4 or 5 levels, and it tells you, and it follows a typical standard progression, such as from a basic understanding. Are you moving into a working experience? Do you need to have the competency proficiency to be at an extensive level or be a deep subject matter, right? So you need to identify at what proficiency a successful person in the current role needs to operate in. And you also need to be able to show individuals what is the proficiency across various roles, so that if they choose to move to a different position, they know what proficiency they need to operate at. And let me add this. It's not enough just to state the proficiency level. It's also important to give what does that indicate? What does that mean? So what does decision making look like if I am an administrator and I have some basic understanding that I should make simple decisions at my desk, to now being an individual contributor or a professional with working experience and have to make a slightly enhanced decision making, right? So we need to be able to tell our employees, what does that truly look like? So building that out, and then the next step is vital, because now you're showing what are the feeder roles, what are typically jobs that feed into a particular role, and where do individuals in a specific role typically move out. And we start with a basic framework or a recommendation, but really we encourage, through the system, we encourage organizations to track that, because this is great historical information that you can share with even new employees to say, hey, check this out. We've had people from our business development actually go in and become COOs, right? So, and here's what they had to do or get involved in order to get there. So this creates almost career history, not just for the individual. It creates great career history for the organization as well. We talked a lot about leader enablement. It's important that you design a simple approach that managers can follow to have those critical conversations. Here we just took one from ATD. Everybody knows ATD, the training and development folks. They came up with a simple career conversation structure. But this is an example, an illustration. But we encourage that organizations come up with a framework that works for them, and then train your leaders on how to carry this out, how to have those career discussions, help them get to know their employees, and train them to become true career developers, right? And again, less than half, it's just not right that less than half of the organizations don't do it. Don't provide the managers training, or really don't have their employees rate their managers on career management conversations, which is important. So powerful, but probably most important step: automate, automate, automate. I think one of the things that happened, and many organizations who went down the path of a manual approach found it really hard to sustain, because very quickly, when the roles change, when business strategy changes, they can't have their roles keep up, or they can't have the competency framework keep up. And then very quickly, guess what? The career management falls flat on its face. So we believe that by ensuring that you automate, what happens is it's so easy to keep up with this effort. You can have a great framework, and then take away the manualness of it. We live in a very dynamic world where things are constantly changing. So roles and competencies are no exception, and automation is definitely a must, right? So this is for long-term sustainability. So finally, to sum it up, I'd like to say that first, it is important to build a compelling business case for career management. We want to make sure that we open the eyes of the business to understand just how critical it is. I'm sure a lot of CEOs get it, and are probably already looking to HR to implement a program such as this, and maybe it's just small steps. Today's tight job market also requires some creative solutions to succession challenges. We know that we need to be thinking about the future. We need to be thinking about the fact that if we can't find the talent outside, how do we grow that future talent within the organization and link them to your strategic workforce plan? Last but not least, I want to also mention that it's important to celebrate the employee's career progress, as well as the organization's efforts to creating career development progress, because it is important. It is not just an important thing to do. It is probably the right thing to do. It's an investment that's more than worth the effort. And I think this presentation probably, if not anything, highlights that. So this brings us to the end of the presentation version of our webinar. We hope that you found this to be informational just as much as these guys from the Silicon Valley crew apparently enjoy the information. But just wanted to know if there are any questions at this point that we could take on and answer. Feel free to please type in your question in the chat box. We'll give you a few more minutes. We are not seeing any questions. There's one that just came up.
What if only one group wants to do this within an organization?
And that's fine. You know what? I've found that sometimes, even the case of some of the larger organizations that I've worked with, sometimes we pilot it just in one part of the organization. And what we find is that if you have business leadership support for career pathing and career development in that one side of the organization, then our advice is to do it and do it well, model it, make it right, tweak it, get it perfect. And once you've perfected the art of career development on one side of the organization, you're probably going to be successful in then taking those learnings and transferring it across.
Yep. I think one of the cautions that I would have with only keeping it within one organization is it does promote the vertical movement up.
Right.
So if you don't have companion paths, for example, if you started in sales, a companion path would be considered marketing or business development because they share similar competencies. Right. So over time, if you only focus on that one group and that's the only group that you're ever going to focus on, it can promote a vertical
right. Absolutely. Presence. You're right on, because there's some pros and cons. And the other one would also be that you'd have one side of engaged people and the rest of the organization is disengaged because they see this other group having it. So if the intent is to do the one side more, as I mentioned earlier, as a pilot, as a test case to test out a proof of concept, then do so. But please think about long term to think of a universal program that covers everyone, so that you can truly start seeing the power of career management development, which is to see people crisscross and go across the organization, feel like they have information to grow.
And one of the things too, and Cheryl was mentioning this, the measurement ideas, one of the things that we've done within an organization when we have started with a pilot group is when we do the employee engagement survey, we've carved out that group to measure their engagement rates, their retention rates. Not only that, when we're looking at measurements, some of the things that we would track in the system and be able to promote and communicate to the executives on is the number of vertical moves, the number of lateral moves, within those groups, how many have been women, what does career pathing look like from a diverse demographics. So who's moving across the organization? At what levels are they moving across the organization? Are we moving people in a way that we're focused on diversity and we're making sure that we're bringing that to the forefront? And then just the sheer number of moves. Now, the other thing that is also important to track is sometimes people are getting ready for roles, but they might not move right away. And the other measurement that we look at is the number of skills developed per employee as they're moving toward their role. So as an example, when we went into one organization, on average, an employee was developing two or three skills, engaging in 2 or 3 learning opportunities. With a career path, because it's continuous development, we moved the needle and they were developing 15 skills and working on an average of 15 to 20 learning development options. Some it's corporate time, some it's on your own time. So from an organization perspective, if you're looking across and who's going to be more competitive down the line, those people who are developing skills proactively obviously are going to have a much more competitive advantage.
True.
Let's see. Tim's asking a question. Let me just expand this. So it's a very small box. Let's make this wider. Okay. As companies commit to doing career pathing well, are you seeing HR organization chart shifts to encourage recruiting, learning, rewards, and teamwork closely together?
Absolutely. Right on, Tim, because I think that you would suddenly, HR realizes that they have a much more pivotal role to play in being coaches to managers who need to become people developers, right? So we do find that HR begins to play a much more critical role in being true talent strategists, to having engaging in conversations with the business on future talent needs and doing some amount of that strategic workforce planning, as you will, like Linda alluded, like all of the measures that Linda just talked about are measures that is very contrary to what we do today in HR, right? Because we're so focused on just turnover numbers. But now we're going deeper and saying, we're not just giving you turnover numbers, but we're telling you, what are we doing with the development of our people, and where are they going, and who's developing faster, and do we have the skills for the future, and what skills do we still lack, and are we able to find talent pools for those skills, and if not, how do we grow them, and what kind of resources do we need to build within the organization? So the conversation for HR is changing. We find that the org charts are becoming more ones that are splitting operations from strategy, and who are aligning COEs to actually provide support related to learning and development.
Yeah, one of the things I'll elaborate on, one of the projects that we're working on right now with the university is to define at the university level the job frameworks, and we're using some of our partners' data for that, and educating even the students of what skills are required for these job roles so that they can focus their degrees more. And then we're tying in these corporate employers into that career pathing strategy. So as these students are building careers and building skills, employers are connecting their vacancies with those career paths so that we can bridge that conversation between the university, the organizations, and the students for that skill gap strategy. That's one thing. And then the other thing with respect to recruiting and the rewards, we see a couple of our clients are actually using this tool on their website for recruiting of new candidates. And in addition to that, we just hooked in with a rewards provider, and organizations who want to incent certain hard to fill roles and or want to incent the development of key skills that are for the future. We're tying rewards and reward points to either the job role or the skills. And we're helping those organizations become better prepared for the future. And then from that, and we kind of call that gamification a little bit, employees know what the organizations really, really feel are important, and the employees are being rewarded for the development of those skills with whatever the organization deems appropriate. Sometimes it's just a coffee Starbucks card. Sometimes it's lunch with the CEO. All of those are definable on the back end through the rewards provider. So, I mean, those are a lot of answers to your question. But like Sandia said in her presentation, there's a lot of ways that organizations can bring those four compelling components together to have a real solution that works for an organization.
Very good.
Any more questions? We've got a minute or two more. No? All right. Well, without further ado, I would like to thank Sandia for her presentation today. I know she wanted to make it informative for those who might be getting started in career pathing, as well as provide other ideas for those that are already engaged in it and are looking to take it to the next level. As we said, this is a recorded webinar. We will provide it in our Learning Center on talentguard.com. And if you feel the need to want to have a dialogue with us or ask more questions, you can just use the general info account and we'll pass it on to Sandia. And we want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure hosting this webinar. Thank you, and do join us again. Bye-bye.